Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan says he wants more military firepower. He says it's needed to rescue those more than 200 girls in Nigeria still missing after being kidnapped by Boko Haram. He says the threat posed by Boko Haram requires about $1 billion worth of military equipment and training. He wants to borrow that money from other governments. Malala Yousafzai, the teen who survived that shooting by the Taliban, met with President Jonathan earlier this week, urging him to bring those kidnapped girls home. Jonathan, meanwhile, canceled a meeting with relatives after they refused to meet with him. Those girls were kidnapped from their school 3 months ago. Robin Sanders is a former U.S. ambassador to Nigeria. She joins us from Washington, D.C. via Skype. Ms. Sanders, thanks for being with us. The president's saying that he wants more money for his military, and yet 3 months after they disappeared, those kidnapped girls are still missing. So is this a legitimate request or a money grab?
No, I think it's a legitimate request. The news on this has been a little bit interesting to me because the cancellation of the meeting was actually done by some of the groups because they wanted more parents to participate in the meeting. So I think that we need a little bit of clarity on there. I don't think it's a money grab. I've certainly been on the ground. The military does need financial assistance so that some of the more modern equipment, particularly bomb detection equipment, more firepower, more logistics support, they definitely need all of those things in order to address the threat that's out there.
But we keep hearing over and over again that Nigeria's military suffers from an image or corruption problem, depending on who you talk to. So would that be giving money to a military that we might one day be at odds with someday in the future?
I mean, that's always a possibility in any scenario. But if you look at some of the testimony from about 3 weeks ago, the State Department testified, I testified as well, and there are about 187 units that have been vetted for human rights violations and for corruption and all of those things that you've just talked about. So that process is continuing. We're very, very focused on ensuring that resources and money that we provide to the Nigerian government does not fall into either the line of corruption or the line of human rights violations. That's something that we have to be vigilant about. That's something that we're committed to. As I said, that's always a possibility, but everybody's really trying to be on top of that so what you described does not happen.
So let's talk about these girls to keep the focus on them. What is the latest you're hearing? Are there any positive signs that things are either better or worse than before?
Well, I think the security environment still remains in a pretty negative scenario. But there are actually three things that I would point out on the positive side. One is that the issue is still on the front burner. The activist groups that are keeping this on the front burner, I think they're doing a tremendous job. There have been 2 arrests recently. One, you probably have already seen, the extradition from Sudan of Mr. Owuchu, who apparently was involved in the bombings in Yanya, which is in downtown Abuja, about 3 weeks ago. So that, I think, is a positive sign that it shows that intelligence linkages are working. They are trying to find some of these suspects, and they're bringing them back to Nigeria. Secondly, one of the leaders of the vigilante groups, which have cropped up in the northern part of Nigeria as a result of the security vacuum there. Reportedly, he also, instead of really protecting villages and villagers, he was actually a scout for Boko Haram, and he's now been taken into custody. So I think those 3 things show that things, at least behind the scenes and with the intelligent networks, are working. Doesn't mean that there's not a long way to go.
Right.
When I testified a few months ago...
Yeah, let me interrupt you for a second because I want to put reality in on this. The leader of Boko Haram, while you were talking, we showed that video where he was mocking the international efforts to find the missing girls, releasing the video of his own on YouTube. And even though we talk about progress being made, is there any level of shame or embarrassment that if this had been any place else, that 3 months after they were kidnapped, the world would be rising up in outrage over the fact that so little has been done, comparatively?
Well, I think that, that's correct in so many ways. I mean, I made the comparison before that during the Malaysia airline crisis, we had a tremendous support from the international community with resources, both financial and human. I haven't seen the same kind of of commitment made in this situation with the young girls. So the outrage should be higher than it is. The effort to find the girls should be higher than it is. And I certainly hope that that continues to be on the forefront of the activists so they keep it on the front burner. But that being said, I do think that the positive things that I did note need to really stay on the front burner, too, because it does show that something is being done as opposed to nothing being done.
I want to ask you a question that I asked a guest on month one after this crisis broke out, and that was, did he think that 3 months later we'd still be talking about it? I ask you now, 3 months later, do you think these girls are still going to be missing?
Yes. I do. It's you know, the hope for the families. My heart does go out to the families, but I do think the scenario that we're facing, the security environment there is so difficult. We don't know exactly where the girls are, whether they're still in Nigeria or whether they've been broken up into smaller groups and taken across the border. So I do think it is a long haul, and unfortunately, right now, with everything that we're seeing, I think that we'll still be having this conversation at least a couple months out. And I don't suspect that we'll have a situation where we're able to talk in a positive light about all the girls being found and coming back in 3 months. It's a long fight, it's a long haul, and I think Nigeria is in for a long conflict, and they need to prepare for that.
Ambassador, thank you for being with us today. That is Robin Sanders. She is the former ambassador to Nigeria from the United States, joining us via Skype from Washington. Well, as lawmakers in Washington search for a solution to that growing immigration crisis, we're going